I am thrilled to have you on today.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Dierdre Wolownick. I was so excited when you reached out because I knew exactly who you were right away. Because,
good.
you know.
I'm glad it's out there.
Yeah. You many people know your son, Alex Honnold, of course.
Everybody knows, yeah.
But you, in your own regard, are such an avid adventurer, explorer, and it's just been so phenomenal to see all the passion that you share through your interviews, through your appearances on screen. And I'm excited to get into it on the Vancast
All right,
today.
let's roll.
Because, again, bringing this van to people, it's always my desire to speak with people who not only live cool lives and have a passion for what they do, but share that with others and want to bring that out in others, too.
Yeah.
But I'd love to
That's my goal, too, to share it with others and, let them know that anybody can do this.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the big thing, that people assume that, oh, well, she's, this or that. Or no, anybody can do this. I had no clue that I could do this 10 years ago, so.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So let's get this message out there.
Let's do it. For those who don't yet know you, can you give us a little background on who we're going to be talking with today?
Okay, my name is Dierdre Wolownick. I'm from New York City originally. I left there when I was about 28 and lived in various parts of the globe. I've lived in France and Japan and Southern Cal and Northern Cal. I've been a teacher all my life of foreign languages. I've taught 5 different foreign languages on 3 continents. I've been many things while being a teacher. I've been an artist, a selling artist, performer musically, piano, flute, and other things. I've reinvented myself many times during my life, and while doing that, I've sort of, how to put this, come up with a system that anyone can follow. And it will get you to any dream that you can possibly imagine. It's not rocket science. It's not hard. Anyone can do it. And if you follow the program that I sort of laid out for myself, anybody can. I mean, everybody has that little niggling dream in the back of their head, back of their mind. That thought that interrupts your work day, and when you're talking on the phone, and it just creeps in there and gets in your way, that you just can't turn it off. Something that that, well, I could probably never do that really, because it's not me, and I'm not athletic enough or musical enough or whatever it takes. And I'm here to tell you that ain't the case. Anybody can do it.
Well, I already know that so many people are going to get inspired by what we're going to get into today.
Right.
And you talk about this reinventing of yourself. And we were talking off camera earlier about how I run. And I wasn't always a runner. I played football and I did a lot more sedentary things with my life until my senior year of high school. And then I had So I had the idea to start running, and that's when I did cross country and ultra marathons and things. But there definitely was that shift where I needed to say, I'm thinking about this, and then do. So for you, what was it that you were wanting to reinvent yourself from?
Well, it's not really a from, it's a to.
Mm-hmm.
I was perfectly happy as a teacher, and I've been a teacher all my life. I've taught, like I said, 5 different languages for 44 years now. And I'm retired now, though. So I love teaching. I'm good at it. I know how to do it, really well. And my students are successful. And so I've loved the whole journey. But that's not enough. It's just one facet of me, and there were so many other facets I wanted to explore. So whenever I had the opportunity, I did.
So this book right here, of course, that is you on the cover. You wrote a phenomenal book.
Thank you.
Sharp End of Life, which kind of details how you wanted to explore, whether that is an actual outdoor explore what it is that you are wanting to do in life. So I guess what I meant by reinvent yourself from, you're doing things today, beyond teaching, whether that was running, rock climbing, that you weren't necessarily doing, or I don't know if the passion had to grow from your early years. But I guess the question for me is, what I guess sparked this interest in wanting to do different things rather than just, do the things that you're doing day to day in life? what changes when you say, I'm teaching, or, I grew up doing just this. Now I'm going to try something different.
Well, life is like so fascinating. I mean, there are so many things out there that you can do and experience and see and live through, whatever. And, teaching's great. I love it. But it's not everything, And when an opportunity would present itself, I would jump on it. Like the very first, I was teaching in the Bronx, I believe at that time, Bronx in New York City. And I don't remember how it happened, but through a friend of a friend of a friend, I suddenly had the opportunity to go work with Air France at JFK Airport. Well, it wasn't exactly in my wheelhouse. I mean, I wasn't trained to do that kind of work. I was they called me ground personnel. But they had an opening. They needed somebody fast. I spoke the 3 or 4 languages they wanted, and I got the job. And so I did that for 2-3 years, something like that. On weekends, I started Friday evening, night, because there are a lot of night flights from New York to Europe. You get there in the morning. And so when I like to think of it as these cosmic circles bumping around up there. Once in a while they bump into each other, and a door opens, or opportunity presents itself, and if you just have to be receptive to it. There's so much fascinating stuff out there. I mean, people enjoy. I know that people enjoy this because they love going to the movies and seeing some of this fascinating stuff. But for a lot of people, unfortunately, they think of that as fiction. Oh, that couldn't be me. I couldn't do that because, too many people depend on me. I have a job. I don't have the time. And all kinds of excuses that we can come up with. I didn't have the time then. I was teaching full time, and teaching language is really time intensive. It's much more so, say, than teaching math. My brother was a math teacher at the same time, and he never had any work to do at home. He didn't have any work to do at home, and I was constantly at my desk, changing the lessons, grading things, whatever. So it was a wonderful opportunity professionally, for my languages, a wonderful opportunity socially. I loved it.
What a really neat opportunity. And what immediately comes to mind is how you were obviously qualified and prepared for an opportunity when it arose.
Exactly.
And I think that's a key thing too, is that if you're doing something or you're good at something and maybe you like it or maybe not completely, it's sticking with that thing that may lead to other opportunities.
Right. You never know.
Yeah. Because maybe somebody wants to do something, or, the opportunity doesn't arise because they don't know the language that would allow them to be in a situation like that.
Right.
So then let's talk a little bit about what we kind of touched on already, which was running. Let's talk about running first.
So you started after high school. I started at 55.
Yeah, so it's never too late.
It is never too late, absolutely.
And that, I believe that was spurred by some encouragement from your daughter. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, my daughter she's also an extreme athlete like her brother, but she's a good climber, a very good climber, much better than me. But that's not her sport of choice. Her 2 sports of choice are long distance cycling and long distance running. And she's crazy about both. And she's a very upbeat, enthusiastic kind of person. And, when she's crazy about something, everybody hears about it, and she, the love just overflows, as it were. And, well, both my kids have always encouraged me to try stuff, because I always encourage them to try stuff, and that's how they got to try all these cool things. So it was, I got into it sort of by accident. I don't know. Do we have time for the whole story?
We have time for whatever you'd like.
Okay.
I don't work till Monday.
I do. Alex wasn't living at home anymore. He was, out on the road all the time. He had sponsors, and so he would go on expeditions and stuff. But once in a while, he'd come home, restock his van from my refrigerator, and hang out for a while. So he happened to be home, and I went through this period of about 7-8 years. It was really, really hard on me, because people were dying left and right in both families, my husband's family and my family. And I went through this period of 7-8 years where death, then another death. I'd start to dig out, then another death. And then Alex almost died. He had a horrible accident up on Mount Tallac in Tahoe. And then my father. And with a lot of these deaths, I inherited massive amounts of work. I was executor for this and executor for that. And then I had 3 houses to deal with in Pennsylvania from my father. Teeny tiny little houses that my grandfather had built. I kind of wanted them, but I live in California and, I have all these jobs. So, but in order to sell them, I had to remodel them. So every day I would go to work at the college. I'd teach my 8, 9, 10 hours, whatever, come home, change my clothes, go in the office at home and do all the estate work. I'd call Pennsylvania. I'd call West Sacramento to do that. I was remodeling a house there too. All of this alone, because I didn't have any help and I didn't have time to go out and find help and train them in what I needed to do. So that's all I did. And so by the end of this was 7 days a week. That's all I did. And I saw my kids going out and having all this fun. I was so jealous. I saw them going out and having all this fun and challenging themselves and just talking about it, nonstop. And I wanted some of that. But so one night, every night after all the 3 or 4 whatever hours it was of the estate work in my office, I would change my clothes and take the dog for a walk just to clear my head, because I knew that 5:30 the next morning I'd be up doing it all again. So it was a big dog, Malamute, Alaskan sled dog. And so I would just kind of follow along behind the dog and try to keep up with her because I knew this is another big issue with a lot of people about accomplishing things. We tell ourselves stories like this one. I knew from my childhood that I couldn't run or swim or do anything that required sustained deep breathing because I grew up in a house filled with smoke, cigar and cigarette all the time. They didn't know about secondhand smoke back then. They just didn't know. It wasn't a thing yet. And so they'd laugh and we'd blow it away. So like to watch television, I had to, constantly be blowing the smoke away so I could see. It was really thick. And so I'm not too dumb. I did the research. I found out about, the alveolar sacs in your lungs. And once they burst, they don't regenerate. So I knew, quote unquote, there's that air quote, I knew that I couldn't do anything that required deep breathing. So I knew I couldn't run. So I would just kind of try to trot along behind the dog and try to keep up as best I could. And then one night I came home with the dog and as I got to the door, I looked, I don't remember what I used, a watch or something. And I looked and I said to myself, oh, no, is that possible? I just ran a mile with the dog. I ran a mile. Yeah, I ran a mile. So this sounds like nothing. It's a mile, baby stuff. But to me, it was like climbing Everest because I knew I couldn't do it. And so I came bursting through the door yelling, Alex, I just ran a mile. So just somebody like Alex, you can imagine how dull that sounds. But he's always been a good sport with me. And he came out of his room and munching his cookie and said, and what he said that night changed my life, completely changed my life. And I hope maybe some of you guys listening will think about this. He came out and said, well, cool, Mom. If you can do 1 mile, you can do 1.5 miles. I was absolutely undone. He had taken all the wind out of my sails. I had climbed Everest and he wasn't impressed. And then he went back to his room and when I recovered from the shock of, not being taken seriously, I started to think about what he said. And son of a gun, that is the key to everything in life. If you can truly accept that, well, if I can do a mile, I can do 1 mile and a block. Or 1 mile and 2 blocks, or just a half a block. And the next week I'll do another block, and another half mile, a quarter mile. The increments don't matter. How slowly or fast you do doesn't matter, as long as you're going forward. And once you accept that as true, it's amazing because that means there are no limits. And that's what people have always admired about Alex. He can do anything. He just keeps going. You know, like the thing he just did, the HURT, you know, the HURT. 35 miles of climbing. Who does that? Well, I know who does that. Somebody with no limits. And once you accept this as true, that you can do a mile and a block, then really are no limits. You know, and that opens all the doors that you could possibly dream of.
That is monumental.
It is. It truly is.
For anybody to hear.
It truly is.
In college, I remember someone telling me, a teammate of mine, surprisingly, who said, Nick, you could train as hard as you want every day, all day long, and you're never going to beat the first guy at Stanford. And I never did, but I thought that that's not a great way to think about things.
That's a terrible thing to say to somebody.
And he meant it to, you know, be as good as you can. But I was like, I still want to
be realistic. You know, like a lot of people say, well, let's be realistic about this.
Yeah.
You can't climb El Cap. You're 66 years old. And, you know, let's be realistic about this. Well, I was realistic about it.
Well, that's exactly my point. I think that sometimes there is realistic, but at the same time, how do you find out what the actual ceiling is?
You can't know what you're capable of until you try it.
So you did the block after the mile. What was the next step for you?
The next step for me was first to repeat my mile, see if it was a fluke, you know, because I wasn't still convinced yet, you know. And then I went out and started pushing that mile and a quarter, you know, mile. It took weeks, you know, whatever, mile and a half. And after a few weeks, I started leaving the dog at home because the dog always wanted to stop. And I didn't, you know, because I was busy trying to find out where my limits were and trying to let it dawn on me that I had no more limits. This is a hard thing to accept because once you accept that, you have to go out there and start doing stuff. You know? Once you accept that, you can't just sit home and watch television. You know? It changes everything.
I was perfectly fine going about my life before I found running, just sitting on the couch.
There you go.
But once you do it, and once you feel the endorphins from a run, since 2010, I haven't gone more than 3 days without running because I need it. Like my daughter. Yeah.
She doesn't get physical exercise any given day. She's grumpy and things are just not right. Yeah.
So some time goes by. When do you set your sights on 26.2 of these miles in a row?
Well, that very first year, in fact. Yeah. I started pushing that mile, then 2 miles, and then 3, and then I signed up another diversion kind of story, but Alex was going to Spain for a week for a competition, and I had signed up for. I didn't know anything about running. All I knew was every evening I'd go out and jog, you know, with the dog. I'm not a fast runner. I don't even feel comfortable calling it running because I'm not really going fast. I just jog, you know. I just do the distance, but I had heard. What was it called? Run to Feed the Hungry for Thanksgiving. I heard that. I saw it in the newspaper or something. And I was new to running. I was, you know, starting to have a good time, finding my pace, as it were. And I saw that. I said, oh, goodness, 6 miles. I mean, I had run a mile, and I was feeling good about doing 2 miles, you know, 2.5. But 6 miles, I knew I would not finish. There's another one of those, you know, I know that, you know, stories we tell ourselves. I knew I wouldn't finish, but it was such a good cause. You know, I wanted to support the cause, and I'd maybe meet other runners or see what they do and see what it's really like out there in the world of running. You know, I had no clue. I was still running in jeans and, you know, sweatshirt, and I had Kmart sneakers, and, you know, I wasn't a runner yet. And so I signed up for that, and I told Alex, but he was coming home the night before the run. Like midnight, you know, that night. And as soon as I told him about it, he said, well, sign me up. I'll do it with you. I said, well, you're coming home at midnight the night. Are you sure? But I didn't. I still didn't quite fully realize what he was capable of. You know, back then, this is years ago. And so he insisted. So I signed him up. And he came back the night before the race and, you know, fell into bed and got up the next morning at whatever, 6:30, and off we went. And it was astounding to me because like I said, I've just been jogging with the dog. I didn't know any runners. I didn't know, except my daughter. And so I got there like 20,000 runners. It was amazing. When I saw the crowd, it felt like going home. I'm not a runner. I wasn't a real runner. There's that, what do you call that? That imposter thing. I'm not a real runner. Those people are real. They have the spandex and the hats and the shoes, the special shoes and the special socks. Everything I looked at around me was specially made for running. And there I was in my jeans and my T-shirt. But Alex said, well, hey, Mom, we paid the money. We may as well do the run. And so we started. The gun went off, and off we went. And it was hard, really, really hard. Because in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, 6 miles. I can't run 6 miles. And so Alex, he's so good at this. He completely distracted me by telling me stories about Spain, his week in Spain at the competition. And he was running backwards in front of me, talking to me, or running around me in circles around me and running up the lawns on the right and the left of me as I chugged along. I was in agony. Everything was chafing. I had jeans on, for crying out loud. My buckle was chafing. Everything was just wrong. And my glasses were sliding off my nose. It was terrible. And if it hadn't been for him doing that, distracting me, telling me all these wonderful stories, I probably wouldn't have finished. I probably would have gotten to a 3 or 4 and just said, okay, I made a good shot at it, But he just, he held my sweatshirt when I used the port potty, and he, went. It was an amazing experience. And then we turned around a corner, and I saw the finish line. I was like, holy cow, 6 miles. Oh, and that was sort of like, that was my push into running.
That is so wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you can hear it in your voice, how fulfilling that is.
It was. And if it weren't for him, I might not have ever done it.
Yeah. Now, thinking about the actual, accomplishment of even going back again to the first mile and feeling those endorphins or whatever you would call it, definitely endorphins, but was there something else inside of you that you could touch on? Maybe it's, I know you talk about in your book, you grow up in a way that you're supposed to act in a certain way. You fit into a certain box or something.
Duty. Everything was duty.
So is there any part of that you accomplished something that you could have maybe never foreseen yourself doing later in life that then opens something up inside of you that
sure.
accomplishment-wise?
It was a combination of things. That and, the encouragement from my kids and the help from Alex.
Mm-hmm.
It was a whole slew of things that fed that, But, it was a great experience.
Did you keep running beyond that?
I did. Oh, yeah. I've done 4 marathons and, 7 or 8 half marathons and countless little runs. And I still do once in a while, but I had foot surgery a few years ago, and it's really hard right now. There's a lot of body parts that are complaining if I do, So...
Well, the cool thing is no one can ever take those away from you.
No,
You did
exactly.
those.
I did those.
It's fun to think about the, it's the accomplishment of the run, but it's the accomplishment of overcoming and doing something you didn't think you could do.
Exactly.
Again, going back to that.
That feeling of surpassing yourself. Is, when I knew I couldn't, and to prove that wrong is just, there's no feeling quite like it.
When you think about sharing your story about this particular avenue, running, do you think it is, do you encourage people to seek something physical? Do you think it's something about the physicality of running that allows people to find purpose, to find passion, or can it be?
No, it can be anything.
Yeah.
It can be anything. Working at the airline, that was no big deal, but that kind of launched me on a path of going out and exploring new things, when I said I reinvented myself, I've done many different kinds of things. Like when we moved to West Sacramento, the kids were tiny, 3 or 4, whatever, 3 and 5. And West Sacramento was not a city yet. It was just a little suburb of Sacramento. So for everything cultural, everything, all the necessaries, people would just cross the river into Sacramento. I didn't want to bring up my kids in a place like that had no culture, no stores, no life, a ghost town. For me, this was a ghost town because I'm from New York City. New York. So I've lived in New York City, I've lived in France, lived in Japan, and then here, where I never saw a soul.
Right.
Days, nights, there was nobody around. So music has always been a big part of my life. Performing it, encouraging it, teaching it. I taught piano for a while back in New York, and I've been in many performing groups or performing solo or duet. And so it's always been part of my life. And I wanted to share that with my little children, but there wasn't any. So I looked around and I said, okay, well, I probably know how to do this because I've studied it all my life, not in school, but I myself studied how, I used to go to performances like before they built Lincoln Center, like in the park. Bernstein and Copland. I've seen all the greats and some of the not so greats, and I've watched carefully how they do what they do, because I've always been fascinated by that. And I always kind of wanted to conduct, but by the time that got to be a serious desire, I was already a language specialist, and so I knew I would never have the credentials to do it. I didn't know anybody who had an orchestra. You have to be kind of asked to guest conduct if you're not real conductor. And so I knew, like the smoke in the house, I knew that it would never happen because I didn't have the credentials on paper. But here was the opportunity. Like I said, there's these circles bumping into each other up, in these cosmic circles. Who does that? So I started my own orchestra. I knew how to do the music part. I was already a writer. I've been writing all over the region in both newspapers here in the Sacramento area, or magazines, and so my name was out there. I knew how to get the word out, through the press. I was connected, to what I needed to, and I was a teacher. I knew I would find a school somewhere, regionally, locally, where we could rehearse, So I just did it. I didn't have the time for it, and I certainly didn't have the time for it, and I didn't. It cost a little bit of money at the beginning, not much, just copying fees and stuff. But I didn't have extra money. I didn't have extra time, but I wanted to do it. And I knew I could. And I knew that this is probably going to be my only opportunity to do something like this. Who do you know who does this? So I did. I jumped in with both feet, and it was an amazing experience. I organized the orchestra. I got players from all over the region because, like if you play an oboe, say, or a bassoon, where are you going to do that? You look for little local groups like ours. It's an opportunity to go play your horn or your oboe or whatever. So I got musicians, no problem. And I found a school locally that we could rehearse at, and it was great. We played all over the region. For 4 years I did that. I conducted that for 4 years and ran it. And then I moved away from that area, so it's just too far to go every week. But what an opportunity that was, and what a memory that is, It's crazy.
Creating opportunities for yourself.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. You have to look for them. I mean, they're out there. You just have to find them. Yeah.
Thinking about even this Vancast, I just loved interviewing people on cameras and listening to podcasts, and I'm like, well, no one's really going to ask me, random Nick, to go on their podcast. I'm just going to start my own.
There you are.
And I didn't have the time either. I don't have the time, but it gives me life. I love it.
But if you really want to,
People like to say, I don't have enough time. You always have time for the things you love to do.
Exactly. You make the time for what you really want to do.
Yeah.
If you didn't accomplish something, it's because you didn't really want it badly enough.
Yes.
That's really the only reason to not do something, is that you didn't want it badly enough.
You have the best attitude ever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't really refute any of that stuff. I mean, the only reason to not accomplish something is because you didn't want it badly enough. And if you want it badly enough, you'll find a way to do it.
Mm-hmm. And anybody who refutes that, it sounds ridiculous.
It does.
Don't do
It
that.
does. I mean, who starts an orchestra?
Yeah.
Especially somebody who's teaching full time.
Sure.
And has two little kids. And I was in a crumbling marriage at the same time. I was dealing with that too. And my parents were old and infirm. And, yeah, who does that? I didn't have time for it.
Do you think that it provided some sort of creative outlet to take your mind off of things?
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Music has always been my biggest solace. You know, when life was really shitty, I would sit at the piano and work it all out. And so, yeah, definitely.
It's different from running, of course, because you are in one place.
Yeah.
So what?
Well, it's different. It's different and it's not. You get into that same zone. I mean, the piano has always been the place where I get into the zone. I'll sit down and start to play, and then like it's 3 hours later. You know, I didn't even notice, you know? And same thing happens when I run, too. You just get into that zone and you don't notice time passing. It's just, they call it the zone I mean, there's all kinds of names for that. But, I mean, painting does that for me, too. You know, I just start drawing something on the canvas and then all of a sudden it's like dinner time.
Yeah.
How did that happen, you know?
You have so many hobbies.
Yeah.
Do you ever find that there's just not enough hours in the day?
Yes. Oh, yes.
I
There's
think
not
that
enough
all the
hours in
time.
the week. Yeah. Not enough hours in the week, for sure.
And you love gardening. I pulled up, you were gardening.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. I've always been the gardener.
Yeah.
When I was really little, I was the gardener because my mother couldn't. She loved it, but she couldn't with her polio, you know, so she would hang out the window and tell me what to do, and I'd do it.
So talking about all of the things that you love to do, whether it's gardening, music, running, there's something we still haven't talked about. Painting. Climbing.
Heck yeah.
And I used to climb a lot more. I think I started in 2015. I was climbing at a gym in San Jose. And then I spent some time going to Yosemite through the years, and nothing big, because I worked on a ropes course actually at this Christian conference center in the Santa Cruz Mountains called Mount Herman, if you've ever heard of that. And I worked on the ropes course, and these kids would go on the ropes course, and sometimes the course is only 20 feet off the ground, and the kids would be screaming and freaking out. Yeah. And then there were a few times in Yosemite that I understood what those kids were going through, and I wasn't even.
Oh, is that why they're afraid?
Yep, yep. I immediately understood.
Right.
But I love climbing the gym, and there was multiple things. I had a head injury from jumping into a river, swimming, that I just like to limit my risk and be a little easier on my mom, who dealt with me with a head injury and things. But climbing. Such a big theme for you and your family. I mean, you talk about your son, who's one of the most famous athletes of all time, for sure, the most famous climber that's ever existed.
Right.
Climbing for you, how does that define you in your life?
I wouldn't say it defines me. It helps define parts of me, you know, but because there's the music side and the art side and the language side.
Of course. All
equally important. But it's definitely a huge part of who I am now. It wasn't. I mean, I didn't know about climbing until Alex was a teenager. Really, I didn't know that climbing was a thing. Who ever heard of that? You know, but learned.
Absolutely, and people definitely need to. Of course, we keep pushing the book because it's such a phenomenal book.
Thank you.
But for the people who haven't yet read it, can you talk a little bit about how climbing was kind of introduced into your life, into your family's life, and of course it's grown since?
Well, yeah, it's hard to know where to start to answer that, because Alex climbed from the day he was born. That's all he ever wanted to do, and he could do it from birth on. You know, he could climb. I could never ever have him in a crib, never in a playpen or anything confining like that, because he'd be out in 10 seconds. So dealing with climbing, not the sport, but just dealing with the action of climbing, you know, a little kid, defined my life for when he was a little. I mean, he was a horrible kid to raise, because I didn't know yet what he was capable of. So I was constantly on edge. And, I mean, people would come over to our house, or, you know, see me, have coffee with me, or whatever, and they were constantly jumping to their feet, yelling, "Look out! Look out!" Because my son was so, in their mind, dangerous. You know, he wasn't dangerous. I mean, he knew exactly what he could do from birth onward. I mean, the day he was born, he could stand up. It's crazy. So he was a climber from birth, but other people didn't know about it, and climbing wasn't out there yet in the media, and, nobody knew about it. So that was sort of my introduction to climbing with a small c, not the sport exactly, but the act of, And so it sort of grew, organically with him. It was horrible at the beginning because it's hard. I mean, the biggest job, are you a parent?
I'm not.
Okay. The biggest job, well, you probably know this anyway, the biggest job of parents when their kids are little is to protect them. You put rubber bumpers on the edge of the table and you keep the garbage locked away.
I'm on the other side of that.
Okay,
My parents know.
Right. Oops. So our biggest job is to protect them, so they can grow, healthy. And he pushed that. I didn't know how to protect somebody who could do all these weird things that I couldn't do, I mean, when we moved into our house here, where we're parked right now, it's a little what do you call that? What kind of house is that? A little ranch style house, 1 story and a shaped roof, A-line roof. And when we moved in, he was 5, and he was skinny little thing. So tiny, skinny, scrawny, little, but powerful. And I didn't know about the powerful part because, he didn't talk much yet. And, I just didn't know. And I didn't know about climbing. Anyway, every day he would bug me, Mom, can I go up on the roof? Can I go up on the roof? He was 5 years old. He wasn't up to my knee. And I said, no, you can't go up. Don't go up on the roof. I tried my darndest to prevent him from going up on the roof. And he was a wonderful little boy, very, not exactly obedient. He was obedient when he saw the logic of what you were demanding of him, But if he didn't see that logic, there's no reason to, follow that rule. So one day I was in the kitchen peeling potatoes, and all of a sudden I hear crunch, crunch, crunch up over my head. Oh, I knew immediately what had happened. So I put the potatoes down, I ran outside, and I looked up, and there's Alex having the time of his life, running all over the roof, pulling balls out of the gutters where they'd gotten clogged up, pulling all the debris out of the gutters, cleaned off the top of the heater, doing all this good stuff, handyman kind of stuff, and having a great time. And he kept, and so, Mom, look at this. Mom, look at, you won't believe all the stuff in this gutter. Look at it. And how could I shut that down? I mean, he was so enthusiastic about not the skill, but the adventure of it, and I could see that. It so apparent. And, preventing him from going up on the roof because it's my rule, it would have just been stupid. It would have been, picking a fight you can't win. Mm-hmm. I knew I couldn't win that fight. I knew that, nature was in charge of him. His genes were in charge, and he got those genes from me, so I couldn't really complain. So, I couldn't shut him down at that point.
Was there a shift that needed to happen for you that you could tell, like in your own parenting? Because I think I was the same way. I wasn't allowed on the roof. Probably definitely
Right.
wanted to. I see my dad putting up Christmas lights.
At one point, did you go up there? Huh?
I don't think I ever dared.
You did?
I should have. Yeah. But for you, of course, you recognize this was something inside him that couldn't be tamed. Yeah. But was there a part of you that thought, well, as much as I want to allow this, I still want to be that protector in case of the unknown, in case of the trip?
Yes and no. By that point, I could see that, how to put this, he didn't need protecting from me. He was way beyond what I could either do or do with him or protect him from. He could do all these things that I couldn't do, and he knew it. I knew it. And so it would have just been foolhardy to try to impose my will on somebody who's gone so far beyond me. I knew this then when he was 5, and it's a hard thing for a parent to accept. It really is. And I just, not because it was me, but I don't know, none of the parents who I knew then, we'd hang out in front of the school waiting for our kids to come out and put them preschool and kindergarten and all. None of those parents could have raised Alex because they were constantly giving me advice, because they could see what he was like. He was not interested at all in throwing a ball, catching, catcher's mitt, or none of that stuff. No, nothing else interested him. But the thing that interested him, they didn't accept it wasn't acceptable to them. Mm-hmm. It wasn't normal to them. And so I got tons of advice. Take him to a doctor. He'll give him something that'll make him a little bit more normal. Holy cow. I was so shocked by stuff like that. He was totally normal for him, And he had this gift that the other kids didn't have. And so why should anybody want to shut him down and stop him from doing it? I couldn't understand that. Yeah. I played piano and accordion and guitar, and I played all these things, and I would have, if anybody tried to stop me from doing that, I probably would have left home. There's no way to stop a driven child from doing what they're driven to do. You can't. Mm-hmm. It's not a reasonable thing, and it can't be taught out of them. Mm-hmm. You can just ruin their life. You can put up a wall between the two of you, and I didn't want to do that. Mm.
And you definitely saw something in him and knew what you were doing because you've been able to see the result of what what came from that too.
Yeah, that was really hard. Like 10 years of seeing all this stuff happening and seeing in the newspaper, the magazine articles, and, it was really hard.
I want to get into you actually getting up on the wall, but it makes me think now of when you see him, on the Thank God ledge on Half Dome. For you, do you just see that little kid up on the roof still?
Well, yeah, we've come a long way, but I know that's still him. And I know he's just up there having a great time. Yeah.
When was it the first time for you that you wanted to give it a shot?
What, climbing at all?
Rock climbing in a more formalized capital C sense.
Okay. Well, it was a slow dawning kind of thing. I would get all these magazine articles. I'd look at them, look at the pictures, and my brain was protecting me. It would just tell me, "No, you're reading that wrong. No, that can't be what that can't be what you think." And so I was that was that 7-8 year period when I didn't have a second to myself. I'd go to school, teach, come home, do the what do you call the estate work, take the dog for a walk or a jog, fall into bed and get up and do it again every day. I did that for like a year and a half, 2 years. It was horrible. So I didn't have time to think about it, and my brain, helped me shut that down. No, don't think about it. Just put that aside. So I didn't think about it for a long time, and then I would hear Alex would try. He tried his darndest to help me understand what he did. I never was able to go like to the competitions and take him all. His father did that because I had to do all the work at home. Because if his father stayed home and I did that, when I came home, then I'd have to do all the work at home. So I learned early on just to let them go. So I didn't really see what went on in the competitions or at the gyms and stuff. And then I'd get all these, these wild photos in the magazines and the videos, and I wanted to know what was going on out there. I wanted to know whether my imagination was accurate, whether I was picturing what was going on the right way, whether, because Alex would tell me, he'd give me all these definitions. I didn't speak the language. I'm a language person. I speak 8 languages. And I don't like not understanding what's going on around me, wherever I am. And Alex and his friends would sit around, in my house, and they'd talk about what they'd just done or what they were going to do, what the expedition consisted of. And I didn't understand a word of it. I didn't understand a word of it because climbing has its own jargon, its own vocabulary, its own verbs. It's crazy. And I wanted to know. I wanted to understand. So I had Alex take me to the climbing gym. And he did. He was a good sport. And we went. And again, like with the smoke in the house, I knew that I was afraid of heights. And a lot of people say, "Oh, I could never do that. I'm afraid of heights." Well, guess what? If you're afraid of heights, you're not afraid of heights. You're afraid of falling off the height. There's a big difference. Because once you're tied into the rope And I knew that I had, I was the top rope in the gym, and I knew that the person at the other end of my rope was the strongest climber in the world. I knew that he wasn't going to let anything happen to me. All of a sudden, you're not afraid of heights anymore because you know that nothing can happen. You know that you can't fall off that height. And so I had a great time that day. And then we came home, and Alex left on another expedition for 6 months or whatever, and I was alone. And I didn't know anything. Didn't know, like I said, the jargon. I didn't speak climbing yet, and I didn't have any friends who climbed. I didn't know anything about it. But I knew that I had a great time. And I remembered having that great time when I was a little kid, too, like climbing trees and climbing lampposts and, outsides of apartment buildings and stuff. But I wasn't supposed to when I was a little kid. I was supposed to be good and stay home and help my mother and wear pretty dresses. So I did. So it took me, a month or two to get up the courage to go back to the gym by myself. And I finally did one day. and I had a great time that evening. It was after work, and I met some people who were willing to climb with me and willing to belay me and have me belay them, which was pretty trusting of them because I didn't know what I was doing. But and then I started to make friends, and they started to mentor me, kind of, train me. The rest is history.
Wow, that's amazing. And could you have ever imagined growing up that you'd be one day
doing
never,
that? Never in a million years. Never in a million years.
But of course, it didn't just stop in the climbing gym. You became the oldest woman to climb El Capitan, which is insane.
It is. It is.
To climb it in general is one thing.
We have to specify, though, that I didn't climb it the way my son climbed. I climbed on the ropes, but still I climbed all 3,000 feet on the ropes. Yeah.
It doesn't happen without all that muscle.
No, yeah, exactly. And not only the muscle, but you have to train yourself out of. There's a lot of fear involved in being on a 3,000 foot wall.
Yeah.
And all the other stuff. You have to learn how to use the gear. And, if you do anything stupid up there, people could die. So you have to really dial it in. So it took me a while, but I got there.
How did that feel compared to getting to the top of a wall in a climbing gym, getting to the top of...
Well, it didn't happen overnight. I mean, I started on this wall and then that wall. And then,
right. But I guess, can you look back at where you started, where you came from?
I can, yeah.
Is it the same kind of accomplishment feeling when you ring the bell at the top of the wall or is it just completely different?
It's not completely different because you have that learning curve, like I did when is a newbie climber, somebody starting from scratch, never having climbed. The learning curve is enormous. And it was kind of like that again when I was trying to learn how to do, the big wall climbing is very different from regular climbing, climbing at a crag, whatever. So big wall climbing is a different skill altogether, different kind of gear altogether. I had to learn a lot of stuff. But I'm a teacher, and I worked on a semester system like for the last 30 years, whatever. Well, I'm probably 44. And so I knew that like within semesters at our college is 18 weeks. And I knew that like in 18 weeks, you can learn a little science or a little math or a little language or, you won't be the world's best, but you learn a little of it, So I set myself a goal of 18 weeks to train, to learn everything I needed to know and to get able to do it.
What strikes me is your approach, because you think of it in a very logical way.
Yeah.
But I think so much of climbing and so much of so many of your other passions regard artistic expression.
Mm-hmm. True.
Would you consider yourself to be primarily someone who thinks about things mathematically or with that kind of heart artistic approach to things?
Yes. Yes to both. There's a lot of math in language. There's a lot of math and logic in music. And I would argue that there's a lot of math and science in climbing. Mm-hmm. There's an awful lot of physics involved in climbing that you have to understand. You may not know the names of the things that you're learning about, in terms of physics, but you have to know it in your heart what it does and how it works, and the angle of the fall, the angle of the rope, force, the power of force. I mean, if you fall on, anyway.
Right.
So yeah, yes to both, because there's a lot of math and science, but if you go back far enough, the word science just means knowing. So there's a lot of math and science involved in all of those things.
Yeah, that is interesting. I don't know why that just struck me, because you're thinking 18 weeks, but when you do these activities, you're moving along the rock, and it's so artistic and wonderful, and thinking about it for running too. Yeah. You're going along a trail and you can jump over that rock, but then also
watching my son climb is kind of, for me anyway, maybe this is weird, I don't know, but watching Alex climb, I mean, he's so good at reading the rock, and his movements are so fluid. Watching him climb is like watching ballet, which is music, And so, yeah, there's a lot of both in both, everything you mentioned.
I know you've been asked this before, but I'm curious if your answer ever shifts or changes. Do you ever get nervous watching him?
Not nervous. That's not the word. Yeah, the pit of the stomach kind of, roiling. Yeah, because I'm still his mother, There are some videos that I have trouble watching. And like Moonlight Buttress is one of them. That's just so obvious what's going to happen if he doesn't place his fingers right, And I know he survived it, Like everybody who watches I went to, 7 or 8 of the premieres of Free Solo around the country, And after the first 3 or 4, I'd watch the audience, and the men are always like,
I'm thinking that right now.
Right.
Right this second.
Right. And a lot of the women watch it like this,
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a little bit of that. I mean, I'm his mother, but that'll never go away. But now that I understand, the rope climbing, no, that doesn't bother me, because I know how it happens now. I know what they do, how well they protect themselves, and true, Alex kind of pushes the envelope. Like when he and Tommy do those speed records, and they're pushing it. Yeah. But Alex is very careful. He's always been very, very sure-footed and careful and thoughtful. I mean, it took for more or less 10 years for him to train for El Cap. I mean, he says 2 in the movie, but those are the just with the film crew. Yeah. But for years before that, every time I'd ask him, what are you going to be doing this week or this weekend, or where are you going? The answer was always the same: I'll be working on El Cap. So, I mean, to train for anything for 10 years, 8 years, whatever it was, is an enormously responsible thing to do. Yeah. Both of my kids are very, very sure-footed and careful, and carefully thought through, and I like that.
What comes to mind, and I want to ask you about this, is that when you think about you and pursuing your own artistic or, hobby, passions, whatever you want to call them, and then thinking about your own children, your daughter's passion for running, or whether it's your son's passion for climbing, do you have an opinion on the idea of nature versus nurture? For example, would Alex, this is an odd question, would he be into climbing if he had a different family altogether? Yeah. Nature and nurture go hand in hand. I mean, you can help nature along, or you can hinder it. And you can make somebody's life miserable, or you can help them, encourage them. So, yeah, they're a little bit of both. But you can hinder them to the point where you shut them down, or you can just hinder them to the point where you put up this wall and they don't want to have anything to do with you anymore, But a lot of families go that way. The parents disapprove of whatever, XYZ, and so they never see each other. Oh, that's so sad. That's so sad. I mean, you're his mother or father or whatever, there's got to be a way to meet in the middle. Sure. But when a kid has a passion, like Alex's passion, not all kids are lucky enough to recognize their passion when they're little.
You know, so for some people, it takes decades to find their passion, to find what really drives them. And if you're lucky enough to find that as a kid, it would be a crime to, you know, shut it down, whatever it is.
What I'm then curious about then, let's take you and your passion for climbing as well. Let's say that, or running, you know, let's say your daughter never encouraged you to run, your son never encouraged you to climb. Do you think that there would be something inside you that you were missing that you would never be able to place when you think about your later?
Could very well be. Yeah, you would just always have that uncomfortable feeling that something's missing in your life, you know? I mean, I lived like that for a long time because there was a lot missing in my life for for decades. Because, you know, when I was real little, it wasn't allowed. I wasn't allowed to think for myself. I wasn't allowed to go do things. And then I, you know, was in that miserable marriage for many years. So yeah, you get into this rut of feeling vaguely uncomfortable. You don't know why, you know, or if you can figure it out, you're lucky, you know. But yeah, for sure.
Going back to, again, why I love this medium of bringing the van to folks and asking them about their passions and how they impart that wisdom to others. You just mentioned something that caused me to think about this. You know, if you're lucky enough to find that, how do you, to the best of your ability, remove the luck and find something that you're passionate about?
Parents can help that a lot. We have two main jobs, parents. Well, two and a half. First, when they're real little, of course, just to protect them so they can grow up. But our two biggest jobs are, the first is what you're talking about, to expose them to different parts of life so that they can choose. So that they're not choosing their job in a vacuum. This is one thing I always loved about growing up in New York City. Just walking down the street in New York City is an education in so many different kinds of jobs, things happening all around you. And you can see how this person makes a living. Now this, you know, it's an amazing way to grow up. And out here in suburbia, you don't have that. You just don't have that. How are kids going to know what kinds of jobs are out there? What kind of passions are out there if they never see anybody?
Right.
Unless they drive somewhere. That's a crazy way to live.
Yeah.
So our biggest job when they're starting to grow and experience the world is to try to expose them or allow them to be exposed to different parts of life. You know, buy them musical instruments, let them take lessons in this and that, see what they love. They can't know unless they try it, you know, like so many things. And then the other, the follow-up to that big job is our prime job of making ourselves obsolete. We want to teach them to replace us, basically. You know, they're going to grow up and be us, you know, and maybe take care of us when they're older, and we're really older. So imparting everything we know to them in some way, in some form or other, you know, whether it's by sharing a piano lessons or whether it's by taking them to the planetarium or whatever it is, you know, that's our main job as parents.
For people who grow up and become adults or don't have that same opportunity as children to be exposed to instruments or organized sports or anything, for adults, what would you say? I mean, is this the PSA to go climbing, or what if it's tennis?
No, I don't want to push climbing above anything else. I mean, the world is fascinating, all kinds of fascinating things to do. And right now, we're in a lucky spot right now. We have Mr. Google knows everything. You know, you like racket sports, you know, table tennis or pickleball, whatever. Look it up. Look it up online. But there's so many ways to find things nowadays, but it requires energy. You have to do it, you know, and you have to. Before any of that can happen, you have to know who you are.
That's a bigger question.
That's a biggie. That's a biggie. And I mean, whether you do it through keeping a journal, which is a valuable tool, very valuable, or, you know, therapy or meeting for coffee with your friends and thrashing things out, however you do it, you have to know who you are in order to know what you want to do. Yeah.
I know you do a lot of, again, going back to the podcast, your speaking engagements and things. This is such a treasure trove of information. Why do you like to share this with others? Because I can tell you're passionate about it, and it's such a positive thing too.
Why would I want to keep this to myself? I mean, everybody should know this. The world would be so much better a place if everybody, found out who they are deep in their heart and what their biggest dream is, their biggest driving passion, and whether they can go out and actually accomplish this. And I know how to go out and accomplish these things. And I've kind of got it down to not a science exactly, but a method, and anybody can do whatever they want. There are no limits. Like I learned from my son that day, first day I started running, there are no limits. Once you accept this method, there are no limits to what you can do.
That's right. And you're just a phenomenal example of that, because it's well documented, the things you've done, you've written about it, and people can look at you as an example of saying, this is what it did for her. What could it do for me?
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
I mean, anything that you really want to do or know or learn can be learned. Anything. And we're, especially now in this age of instant information on anything, just sitting at your kitchen table, So, why would I not want to share that? It's so exciting. It really is.
Very exciting. Is there anything that you've yet to do that you want to do?
Oh, lots of stuff. Oh, goodness. Well, last year I ticked off a biggie. I had, since I started climbing, I'd always wanted to climb in the Dolomites. And I did. Last fall, I spoke in Italy and Switzerland and Greece, and I got to climb in those three places. Wow. It was amazing. It was outstanding. So another one of my I'd like to's is to climb in the French Alps. I mean, I've been a French teacher for I don't know how many years, and I've been in the Alps, but not as a climber. And so it's time. I want to go try that.
Like you said before, there is no ceiling. You can do it all.
Do it all. Yeah.
And I just can't recommend this book enough, and this conversation enough. People are going to need to listen to this. This is just so great. This is the epitome of why I like to do this. I just feel your passion. So, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience? I can't thank you enough.
It's been a pleasure. Yeah. We've touched on a lot of different topics. I could go on and on about them, but I won't. But next year or so, I will have another book out about this method of mine. How anybody can do all these things. So just look for that, or check me out on Instagram. My name, Dierdre Wolownick. Keep in touch with me. Keep track of me, and let's talk.
It's so incredible what you're doing and what you're sharing with the world, that it's such a positive message. And when you put that book out, come back on and we'll talk about it.
Absolutely. Will do.
Dierdre, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for inviting me. Bye-bye.